So are short-term rentals still profitable? And how does a bank look at them from a debt servicing point of view? In this video, we're going to unpack all of these topics and see if you should be considering a short-term rental, when they work well and when they don't. We're all going to travel away over the Christmas New Year period. We're all going to stay in an Airbnb, and we're all going to pay a nightly rate that we think is absolutely astronomical. And for this reason, we're going to think, maybe we should get an Airbnb property. They seem to be a massive cash cow. And the truth is, they can be, but also they can be the exact opposite and a major headache. Let's have a look at why this might be the case. So what actually counts as short-term rental income? Well, it could be a holiday-let accommodation in an apartment block that's zoned for holiday rent. It could be Airbnb, stays, bookings.com, anything that's not a permanent tenancy or at least 6 to 12 months in term. Now, as soon as a lender sees this type of income, they have a completely different set of policies that they then implement on your loan applications. And the reason that they do this is a lot of these rental properties could be seasonal, could have peak periods, they're less predictable in terms of income, they're sometimes in areas of higher risk, they can be more dependent on how you're managing the property itself rather than the location or type of property. And sometimes these forms of short-term rentals might have overinflated returns for the first 12 to 24 months. So from a lending perspective, short-term rental income is far more unstable than long-term leases. From an actual ownership point of view, a lot of people love short-term rental income because it does a handful of things. Number one, it has a higher rental income on a nightly rate. Now, over the Christmas period, this can be astronomical rental returns for the owners. How astronomical? Well, on a yearly basis, some short-term rental accommodation will earn up to 20 or 40% more in gross rent than a similar property with a long-term tenant in place. Also, gives you plenty of flexibility. If you do own one of these properties, you can always use it for your own personal use in amongst the tenancies being in place. And lastly, they've got good tax deductions. You've got much more that you can claim as depreciation against the rental income that you're receiving. So there's some areas around the country, Gold Coast, Sunshine Coast, Jervis Bay, where you can easily see that holiday rental properties or short-term rental properties would well outperform long-term rentals. But it's not all wine and roses. There are some very significant downsides with these kind of properties. Number one, running and management costs. When you think about cleaning, linen, consumables, and that kind of thing, these will cost you up to 40% more to run one of these properties than a standard tenancy agreement. The next is regulations. There's lots of councils that are changing the rules when it comes to short-term accommodation, Melbourne being one of the most famous. Another downside is competition. Far more people have got on the bandwagon of this over the last 5 to 10 years with the invention of Airbnb. Now, that means that you're not the only person in that area who has a property up for short-term rental, and maybe that means that the nightly rate that you take is reduced. And the last one is obviously seasonal risk. So the rent can change on a month-to-month basis by up to 70% between the low and peak months throughout the year. So obviously there's a lot of downside. Now, I've seen plenty of investors overcome these downsides by treating these short-term accommodation properties like a business. They run them like a professional organisation. They use data in order to set their nightly rate. They select locations where they get stable all year round income. They have cash buffers, and lastly, they understand the lending policies that are going to be at play before they enter into this type of purchase. And that's what brings us to the heart of today's video. The trap that I see mostly is that people not understanding how a lender will take short-term rental income before they go ahead and make the purchase. Do it back to front. Understand exactly how a lender is going to look at that property for the next 10 years before you decide if it's going to be right for you or not. The first reason is most lenders heavily shade the income that you're receiving. And in most cases, they shade it well below what they would class as reasonable rental income if the property was rented on market on a long-term tenancy. And the reason that they do this, number one, it's harder to verify. Number two, it's not guaranteed. Number three, it's volatile. And number four, it's obviously grossly inflated in the peak season. So what does this look like from a practical perspective? Most of the big banks will only be considering about 50 to 70% of the gross rent that you receive from the property, as opposed to 80 or even 90% if it was rented with a long-term rental agreement. But it gets worse. Some lenders will only consider that 50% if it's professionally managed. Can't even do it yourself. Or they will take 50% of the rental income received in your tax returns, or the profit that they see in your tax returns. And I've seen lots of tax returns for people with short-term rental income, and guess what? It's full of everything that they could possibly deduct, right down from internet, lighting, cleaning, gifts for people that stay there, wine, food, the list goes on. So most clients' tax returns do not reflect very profitably at all when they've got short-term rental income in them. If you have one of these properties, or you're thinking about getting one of these properties, you might be best to shift your focus from the lender that you're currently using to a lender that is better with this kind of income. Some other lenders will just allow you to supply the previous year's rental income statement from a property manager. Now this works out a lot better, and they can use up to 80% of what they see on that rental income letter for the 12-month statements. And there's some non-deposit taking institutions that will even consider using 100% of the income, but it's at an increased rate. So we have to work out whether we're going to be conservative in our lending approach, or we need something that's slightly more adventurous right from the outset. And remember, it's not just at time of purchase. If you need something slightly more adventurous to get the purchase to work, you might be with that lender for a considerable period of time before you have the ability to refinance to a cheaper option. So who should actually be looking at short-term rental accommodation as a good asset class for them? I usually say this isn't your first property. It's probably not your second or your third. This is the one that you put at the end of the line. You're probably getting to the stage where you've got a reasonable amount of borrowings. You're probably not going to want to borrow too much more, but your portfolio could do with a bit of cash flow boost, and maybe you could do with a property that you could then visit for a little bit of R&R. So the ideal client that buys these properties has the following attributes. Number one, they're investors that are looking for high yield or high cash returns, and they're a bit experienced and they can then work the numbers to get the best possible return out of that property. They're people that want cash flow, not necessarily cash flow from a serviceability point of view, but cash flow from a dollar and cents point of view. They're people that want either a property in a high tourist area or in a CBD location. They're people willing to treat this property like a business and spend a little bit more time and effort in regards to the management and ongoing management of that property. Think about all the things that you'll need to tick off, how it's furnished, how the linen operates, how the booking agent operates, what are we going to do with breakages, what are we going to do with cancelled bookings. If you're prepared to go down that path, then these are a great option. Lastly, it's for people who understand that the borrowing for it might be slightly different, and we really have to open our minds to other lending options that might specifically suit this kind of property. And who shouldn't be looking at these properties? Look, if you have minimal cash buffers in place and can't take a month or two with no bookings, then these aren't for you. If you're heavily reliant on bank servicing calculators and you want to purchase other properties in the future and you need the income from this property to heavily support those future borrowings, then these aren't for you either. If you want to set and forget investment property, then these aren't for you. And if you think that you want to get on and borrow maybe 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 properties in the future, then these probably aren't for you at this point in time. This is the property that you put at the end of the line, not at the front. So lastly, let's finish off with a few tips and tricks in regards to the lending and what you need to do to get the most out of your lending on short-term accommodation. Number one, make sure that your records are all in order. Make sure that you've got clear income statements for the last 12 months to 2 years. And remember, try and keep the costs associated with that property to its lowest possible. Think about whether you're really going to claim a lot of the things that may be peripheral to that property, knowing that a bank is going to want to see these statements for ongoing debt servicing purposes. Just be careful with what you're doing. Keep all of your records in order. Number two, where possible, use a professional property manager. A lot of lenders will only consider income when it's professionally managed. The next one, try and focus on providing stable rental agreements over the yearly period. Lenders don't really like to see boom and bust when it comes to looking at your yearly income that you're receiving from your investment properties. The next one is, we all buy these properties so we can use them, but be a little bit sparing with how much you do use it and whether you're using it in the peak periods. Obviously, your 12-month statement's going to look pretty miserable if you use the property over Christmas, New Year's, Easter, Anzac Day long weekend, and over the King's birthday weekend. So think about when you're going to use the property and be a little bit sparing with it, knowing that a lender is going to want to see those statements eventually. And lastly, be open-minded to lending options. Not all banks love these things, and we need to kind of be a little bit picky and choosy as to who we finance them with. So the final takeaway is this: they're not for everyone, but they can be great. But it's when you choose to purchase one and where you choose to purchase one, that can be the key. Then it's how well you operate it. Now, they're not for everyone. There is plenty of people that should just walk past them, keep paying their Airbnb rates until they're ready to put one of these in their portfolios. Now, if you're not sure if you're ready to buy one yet, or you thought that you were going to buy one, or you see one over the Christmas break that you think's just amazing, and that's where you want a holiday next year, reach out to us. We'll chat through the math and numbers, see how it's going to fit within your portfolio, and decide if now is the right time to pull the trigger on such a purchase. You can always follow the link below to book in a meeting with myself and my team. And as always, like and subscribe and share this content with someone who it might benefit.